everyone, Steve Elliott here again. Today I'm going to take a sketch that I did when I was out and about using paper by 53. This is a sketch I'm going to do, and I'm going to turn that into a watercolour painting. When I say that, turn it into watercolour painting, I mean I'm doing a totally different piece. I'm just using that for reference because it's got the tones in there that I need and the scene. So no photographs being used here at all, just the sketch and working from memory. So I begin using my two brushes, well, one brush to start, the wet in wet brush I've created to get in those nice soft tones for the sky and the trees. I've selected the palette of colours I was going to use before I started, so nothing to worry about there. I know exactly where I'm going with that, and there's going to be white bits of paper left because the actual lake was frozen. I wouldn't say it was frozen solid. I wouldn't have liked to have walked across it, but it was definitely frozen. And in previous years I've seen swans walking across this canal. I probably called it a lake earlier, but I meant canal. So I'm just getting in the local colour. I think I'm using the wet glaze brush here for this bit. I've moved away from the wet in wet brush. The wet in wet brush I've created is really for big areas, large areas, getting them covered in quick. So I'm going to work on some more brushes, I think, because they were just a trial, the first two I made. Really pleased with them. It's nice to see people have been downloading them to use. That was great. Nice feeling that I'm, doing stuff that people want. So that was cool. So I've gone on to another layer now, second layer. Or third layer even now, and I'm using the same colour that I've got in the sky, really, just a deeper tone. And you'll notice I always sort of put a bit of colour in and then soften it off a lot. That's sort of how I work with traditional watercolours. I'll put a colour on, then with a wet brush I'll smudge that out. I start to work into these trees now. I'm kind of liking the bright blue that I put in there, but I think I go a little bit over the top with the branches. It starts off okay, and this bit I'm alright, and then I look back and I think they're way too dark to get the aerial perspective. And what I mean by aerial perspective, I mean the distance between the narrowboat and the perceived distance of the trees. And because they are so dark and so strong, it's almost as if it's a flat surface and there's no distance pushing those trees back. So you can see now I start to soften it all off and lift that colour out to push them back, and you can see they now look a lot further back than they were before. And then I think I've messed it up because I wanted some light areas shining through the trees and it was just too sludgy, so I started again with those with a lighter colour, soft colour, and I was very conscious that I didn't go in too dark this time. So that's something to be thinking about when you're doing landscapes, the aerial perspective, lighter, softer colours, the further back you go, and then as you get closer to you, that's where you start putting in your stronger, warm colours. You put your cool colours in the distance as well. Adding a little bit of a warmer colour in it now. This is a similar colour palette that I used on another program. I was messing about with Affinity Photo and I've used a similar palette here. That's no real reason why I did that, it just turned out that way. I put that little bit of blue in the building because I thought it was, again, it was too dominant and coming forward too much. I wasn't feeling that. So the clump of trees, the soft colours in there, that's going to represent twigs later on. As I put more branches in, that softer colour will leave the impression of twigs. And I'll keep building up this colour with layers, so I'm using a lot of layers in this one. What I did forget to do at this point is use my texture paper, and I've just loaded it in there. You can see now the image has gone slightly darker, because once I put that in and I put it at the top of the stack and set the blend mode to linear burn, I think it was. I'm sure it's linear burn. Anyway, all the colours were a little bit darker, so then I had to create another layer, and that layer I filled with 50% mid grey or 50% grey, and then I changed the blend mode to add, and I set the opacity to 16%, and that just lifted the colour slightly. So the picture is a little bit not quite as sharp because it's got that texture on it now, but it's definitely looks more like a watercolour. I was using my lifting out brush, the wet in wet lifting out brush. I've discovered a trick that if I create another layer at the top of my stack and set the blend mode to add, when you paint into it with white, it's like using the eraser on every single layer below it, and it's non-destructive because you can then use the eraser and rub that white out and keep the colours underneath. So that's something that I'm really into now, creating this layer near the top of the stack for lifting out, and you can see I'm using it there. So I've got a white paint on this add layer, and it's lifting out all the colours in all the layers below it, and that's given me the kind of frozen look of the canal. You can see I working on lifting out some of the pencil work, and then using I think I used the water brush to put in these fine lines for the trees and the detail. I thought I needed to put a little bit more detail into the narrowboat, just not a lot, just an indication that it's closer and there's more detail going off there. So I'm deepening the colours in those trees, and then I use my wet in wet brush to add some depth to the trees, the reflection in the canal. And I'm definitely using way more layers than I've used before. It's really useful to be able to go back in and do things like adding that depth of colour to the reflections of the trees, and be able to work underneath the marks that I've put in for the frost on the canal and not damage that. So whereas before I was flattening the layers all the time, I'm leaving them now. I'm getting much more used to working with layers. So I think it's coming to the end. I'm just putting the final details in. You can see I've already signed it. I signed it a while ago, and then felt it needed some more work on it. I wasn't happy with the footpath, so I went back into that, and then a little bit more detail on the frost, on the water going in there. But I've kept a really cool palette throughout this with blues and just hints of warm colour there. I felt it needed a few reeds just popping out of the frozen water there, just to add a little bit of detail to that area of the painting. It all looked a bit bare and unbalanced, so that was what that was all about. That's not in the original sketch at all. It was just something I felt that needed to go in just to create a balance with everything. So that is it. Thank you very much for staying with me to the end of this video. I hope you've liked it. If you did, a big thumbs up is always appreciated, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I've got lots and lots of paintings that I want to do and share with you, so hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.